We're talking with Mark Lepak, a member of the Oklahoma House of Representatives. Mark, you didn't finish what you were talking about just a moment ago. I'll give you about 30 seconds to do it because I got to get into some other issues.
Boy, I wish I remember what it was, but I think it was about education. Well, I guess the main point I was trying to make is I hate to legislate what people ought to be doing anyway. And we tend to file a lot of bills and want to run a lot of stuff to force something to happen that ought to be happening organically. So from an education perspective, we started off talking about the superintendent, and I kind of morphed into something else. My wheelhouse is the big corporation and organizations and how they function and how to organize around them. And so a lot of what I'm advocating in state government is a structure that maybe will serve us better, looking for efficiencies, but mostly looking for more effectiveness. Mm-hmm. But those fights can happen over, those dialogues can happen over multiple years, and so I think that's where we are right now. I think our governor's trying to make some of those transformational changes, but I think a lot of people are viewing that as a power grab, if you will.
Well, I have to tell you, one he's doing, and that's the battle with the various Indian tribes over the contract. And I have to tell you, from my vantage point, it looks like we ought to be buying them hats from the 7th Cavalry because there ain't no I just see money flying right out the window. These Indian tribes have done well, and they haven't squandered it. They've educated their people. They've shared beyond what they've given the state to small districts here, there, and yon in various ways. And I've looked at the legislation that he's referring to. To me, if I'd signed it, I would have said, yeah, there's the automatic renewal clause right there. That plainly states it. I'm not a lawyer.
Neither am I.
I don't speak lawyerese. Thank goodness.
Well, I tried, in fact, I just wrote a little op-ed for the local paper about this, but I'm trying to remember what I knew when I voted on this question back in 2004, so it turned out. I couldn't remember the year. 15 from today ought to be about 2004, right? So I had some staff folks go dig some stuff out for me and looked at the legislation that created the state question. So the model compact was within that legislation. And I want to make sure that I was reading the correct wording, because you're not quite sure when you're reading accounts. And it's a tangled up mess of a sentence. It's 100 words long. There's a semicolon in the middle of it. And so it clearly says automatic renewal in there. It also says there's a termination date on the 15-year term, which, depending on how you want to look at that, would suggest, well, there's an end to it, right?
Well,
but I think the key is after the semicolon, where it says, provided either party may request to renegotiate parts A and E. A is where the fees are that are in the debate. Well, what does exactly that mean? Is it both parties have to agree to renegotiate? One can request, and the 15 years is the timer when you can, when you do that, or
and there's also the placement of the wording.
Yeah.
The placement of the wording is intriguing because, first, under the legislation passed by our House and Senate and approved by the governor, was, it will expire, and if nothing else, is done by either party, if they don't get back and start negotiating and hammer something out, then it will automatically, go into effect again for 15 years.
Well, what compels people to come up with a deal other than a good deal both sides get?
There you are.
And I don't know. It doesn't surprise me that it's in the courts. Just layman's look at the language, it's like, well, I can kind of see both sides. Now, I will say the tribes are great partners with the state. The things they're investing in, if they were just a business and you were collecting taxes and as a legislature, you would be putting them towards the same priorities, whether it's education, roads, healthcare, housing, those kinds of things. So I think an advantage the tribes have, and I know they're focused on their tribal members, but the things they do benefit non-tribal members too. And they have a unique advantage in that you have state, federal, state, you got county, city, governments all doing different things, and they're able to kind of look at it and make some decisions about where to place some of the funds that they are appropriating or allocating to various causes, and they bridge a lot of gaps with that money. And you don't want to lose that. You don't want to lose the partnership, and they remind us all the time, but it's easy to forget they are sovereigns. There's law that establishes they're a sovereign nation, which is different than a contractual arrangement between two parties. Compact's different than a contract. And I wouldn't pretend to know the technical legal issues around this, but just kind of somebody that's standing off watching. And the thing that's kind of lost right now is when we ran the state question, there was this pari-mutuel betting, horse racing, and gaming in there. And the concern was that at the time, as I remember now, that we were losing that business. And so there was this fight, this negotiation to put it all together. And I think what needs to happen is probably the individuals that negotiated all that are probably going to surface soon to start speaking to what they were thinking and what it meant. We're looking back 15 years ago trying to parse wording that may or may not be what we think it means.
We got about 2 minutes.
Okay.
I've got to jump in with this.
Okay.
Are you going to run for governor?
No.
Why?
I just never was on my mind, but.
Oh, come on. You didn't think about that even just a little bit?
No, actually, I was going to run for state senate. And the day I was going to go tell the incumbent I was going to challenge him, I found out a friend of mine Marty Quinn, who was the state rep, was going to run for senate. And he knew that the previous senator, Sean Burridge, wasn't going to run. He just hadn't announced it yet. And so I looked at it as, well, for the representation here in our community, I was good with Marty. I like Marty, a friend of mine. I helped him get elected. There's no sense running a primary. It's more about representation. The reason I was running was about representation within the Republican caucus who had control at the time.
Let me see if you've got taps on your shoes. I think you may.
You think I tap danced?
I think you're tap dancing on me, buddy.
I may have rhythm, but I'm not a very good dancer. So, seriously, to answer your question, no, I'd ever thought about governor. I just haven't.
You're going to re-up for the House?
Yes. Yes.
All right.
I've announced that, and
I'm going to give you 30 seconds. What do you want your legacy to be after you leave?
Well, I mentioned the executive branch reforms and the big agency appointments, statewide elected official stuff. There's some judicial reforms I'd like to see related to how we select judges. My wife is on the JNC, who screens the nominees for Supreme Court, appellate courts, and some district appointments. I think that needs to be changed dramatically, done away with. But if nothing else, the process needs to be opened up a little bit. Think open meetings.
Let me ask you why.
Well,
why the change at the court?
Full disclosure, my wife is on the JNC. My daughter actually applied for one of the recent Supreme Court nominations. There were some things about the process that I observed that I think demonstrated problems internal to the way we're doing this.
Okay, that's it.
But
we're out of
okay,
time. Will you come back?
Sure.
We'll make this a quasi-regular gig,
Well, starting next week, I got 4 months down in Oklahoma City, but we
yeah,
figure
2,000 bills, I'd say so.
Thanks.
Thanks, my friend.
Sure.
We're out of time, and we're going to play ourselves out of here, so jump up and dance if you want to. We'll see you next time.
I got a one-track mind, baby, and it's me that's on her mind. Every time I step out of her sight, my baby, she starts a-crying. And how can it be that simple me could have a love like this? I got a one-track